Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. Keith, what's so funny right now?
I'm not going to shame anybody. I'm just happen to be looking at a team's rankings on frisbeerankings.com, a much beloved website. And there is a team that gained 41 rankings points for being bageled
by their opponent.
Yes, they failed to score a single goal, but by simple virtue of stepping on the field with another team, they have gained the most ranking points, I think, of any result on their entire.
I see. I'll name the teams. I don't care. Okay. Seattle Underground lost 13-0 to Fury, and currently is gaining 41 points in the rankings because of it. Because Fury is that good.
It's blowout eligible.
It's not good,
but that's really ridiculous.
The rankings. They're
wonderful, logical beasts.
They are crazy right now, folks. They're not going to make any. The club rankings are not going to make any sense until after Pro Championships. Like, really, I mean, they're going to start to make some sense maybe after Elite Select, but there's just a lot of wackiness still in these rankings, and I don't. It's hard to assess right now, like, what the bid situation's going to be looking ahead to 3 weeks from now. We're going to talk more about the rankings and the bid situation in our subscriber bonus segment, so we hope you'll join us for that in Out the Back. Less than $4 a month, ultiworld.com/subscribe. We kind of have something of an off week, Keith. We had the under 20 World Championships last week, so we're going to talk about that over in Poland. USA getting the sweep in the U20 Open and Women's divisions. And we also need to catch up on something that we have yet to talk about. It's been out for a couple weeks, but we've been talking Frisbee. Olympics, LA 2028.
We're in.
If only that were the news I had to deliver for you, Keith. Ultimate has been dropped from consideration as one of the additional sports to be added to the Los Angeles Games, specifically for that games. This news was delivered. It came out of the newspapers about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. My understanding is that the news actually was sort of delivered to the various sports organizations before the World Games, right before the World Games. So it's been about a month, a little over a month at this point that the World Flying Disc Federation has known that Ultimate was not going to be in. And this, just to give a little background here, this comes as kind of a blow. I mean, not just not getting in, but to not even make the short list of sports that are still under consideration for getting added and being able to sort of like put in a formal proposal to the LA 2028 Tournament Organizing Committee is kind of a slap in the face. And here are the sports that are still alive: baseball and softball, breakdancing, cricket, flag football, karate, kickboxing, lacrosse, motorsport, and squash. So of those, lacrosse is a team sport, flag football is a team sport, cricket is a team sport, and then baseball and softball. Baseball and softball was in the Tokyo Games in 2020 and is considered among the favorites to get in for LA as well. Obviously, long history of successful baseball in Southern California. The Dodgers, of course, you got a perfect stadium. So Ultimate is out. And here's what WIFDF President Nab Rao had to say in a statement. WIFDF is surprised and disappointed to not have been included in the short list of potential additional sports invited to submit a proposal for inclusion in the 2028 Olympic program. Flying disc sports is actively practiced on a competitive level in 103 countries in the world and appeared to satisfy all of the objective criteria agreed between the IOC and LA 28. These criteria included not adding cost and complexity to the games by utilizing full venue sharing on the beach or grass stadium, having total gender equality with our gender balanced mixed format, having youth appeal, and ensuring that the top athletes were involved. There are a few other sports that can boast an equivalent Californian DNA as Frisbee, and we felt our Ultimate Fours format, requiring a total athletes quota of only 48, would fit well given the overall cap on the games. So, Keith, when you heard the news, what was your initial reaction?
Charlie, it's difficult news to hear, to be honest. It's not like suddenly the sport is dead or anything, but I would say this has been a big thrust of what Ultimate has been working towards. It's been the brass ring that we've been reaching for, with the hope that like our efforts would lead towards success in this area, and that would help grow the sport, and then all the benefits that would come with that. I know there's not necessarily like universal agreement on that idea, but I think that was the general direction that the sport has chosen to take over the past 10 years or so, and a lot has been informed by that kind of pathway. So failing to reach it, and it's hard to say that like the door is fully closed or anything, but this is probably as close as it's ever felt, right? Like there's not a lot of opportunity to get back in. I mean, this felt like the best shot, a very American sport, while the games are being hosted here in the US. It's hard for me to imagine a better environment for Ultimate to try and get into the games. And while Nob is right about the many check boxes I feel like we hit, it isn't just about hitting the most check marks. It's about hitting them harder and a greater number of them than your competition. You can go out and play a good game, but if you play worse than the team that you're playing against, you're still going to lose. So it's troublesome, because it's like, okay, we may have to kind of go back to the drawing board here. We may have to redesign the plan, go into rebuild mode. We tried to win a title, we failed to do it. A lot of changes might need to happen in order for us to be competitive again.
I think we should talk about, kind of what's next in a second, but I want to come back to what you just said, which is that, we have to check more boxes than the other sports. Here's the thing. There's an underlying, unspoken criteria that is the number one most important. Money.
Yeah.
Are you going to make them money? Is it going to be lucrative relative to other sports? And that means fans in the stands. That means broadcast interest, you name it. Ultimate is still tiny. Why is lacrosse still in? It's bigger, has more money, it's got more fans. At the World Games, I don't know, there were 10, 15, 20,000 people watching the lacrosse final.
Why did flag football get the fast lane?
Flag football,
the express pass,
has never even been in the World Games until this year. The NFL partnered with the World Games to bring flag football to this year's games. And the World Games hadn't even happened when they already were put onto the short list for potential inclusion in LA 28. Because it's the NFL. The NFL wants to get flag football in the Olympics. I'm not sure that that's going to get in, to be honest. Because
I'm also not entirely sure why. Maybe I guess is like a international seating. They've been trying to expand to Europe for forever.
Yeah, and I think, international recognition of the game, but I mean, I think it's also just like tons of visibility for the sport. I also think, Keith, and I don't know that this, maybe there's an article out there written by some sports journalist, but like I think that the NFL is really interested in trying to encourage participation in flag football. Because they are losing a lot of people playing tackle football because of the head injury issues, and
which are so a definite concern.
Yeah, and like they're worried about the long-term health of American football, and obviously the NFL is a massive behemoth in terms of money. So they're in because it's the NFL pushing probably lots of money and resources. I mean, like the flag football finals highlights on YouTube have like 400,000 views. on the NFL's YouTube channel. Ultimate's not getting that. So that's the underlying thing that's been kind of the biggest hindrance, right? I mean, we've known this. We've known that the Ultimate is going to have an uphill battle, not because the game isn't good, not because it's not a format that is appealing to the ethos of the Olympics. This is all obvious. I mean, I think you can look, if you watch the World Games, you see a great product. That's a great sports product. It doesn't matter whether you are an Ultimate fan or you're just a casual sports fan. Like, that is a great product. It's fun to watch. The problem is there's just not enough people who want to watch it. And fundamentally, that is shaping these conversations. And that's why Ultimate isn't even through to the next round. And you're right that this is the closest that it's ever come. And I have to say, Keith, I think it's over. Like, barring major changes to the way that the Olympics set up their number of sports, the athlete cap, how they bring new sports into the games, it's done. The next shot is 10 years from now in Brisbane, Australia. And, like, do you really think that it's going to get in there? If it couldn't get into LA? I think it's like time to say, you know what? We tried and it didn't work out. And now we just need to have that be a back burner project at best. And, you know, you think about all the things that Ultimate has done to try to get in the Olympics, like the Tom Crawford hire and subsequent renewals of contracts has basically been exclusively about the Olympics. I mean, he had contract extensions built into his contracts over the previous contracts, at least, where he got an automatic extension if Ultimate made the Olympic program. It's done. And I think Crawford was going to retire anyway, but, like, you know, they just renewed his contract last year through the end of 2024, I believe. And, you know, now it's just like total lame duck situation with Olympics out of the picture.
That definitely feels like this is a turning point, at least for USA Ultimate's governance and you know, whatever impact this also has on WFDF and the greater international Ultimate community. But you know, you can see why. Sometimes I see these arguments online where people are talking about, oh, we need to make the sport, we need to professionalize the sport so that we can be more attractive to the Olympics or whatever. And, like, you can see why that path is frowned upon by some others, because trying to out professionalize these much larger, more resource rich organizations in sports was just not going to happen. Like, you probably are better off trying to be the wild card, trying to find some other thing that'll appeal beyond your fan base and the size of your sport and the money behind it. And, you know, Ultimate tried to put some of that front and center with gender equitable play, like having mixed gender competition, you know, trying to focus on other areas, spirit of the game. Like, these are things that were advertised as some of the biggest benefits of Ultimate, but wasn't enough. And I think that this is also happening at a time when in the US, I think that the kind of parallel push for hashtag legitimacy with ESPN and top level competition, all that stuff, I think players are kind of done with it too. So those two things coinciding makes me feel like we're going to see a major shift in direction that could really have Tom Crawford's leaving the organization as a pivot point. You know, having a new person in charge of steering the ship, that feels like a potential, hey, we need a new strategic plan. We need a new direction. We're going to go the grassroots route, or we're going to try and nationalize Ultimate, or we're going to, you know, move out of doing club, or whatever the big change is going to be. That feels like the point that it's going to happen. I mean, this feels like a big deal.
I mean, this has been a 10 to 15 year project for both the WFDF and USA Ultimate. And many of the things that have been sort of put into place have been focused on attractiveness to the Olympics. You want to go back to Beach of Dreams. You want to go back to seeking IOC recognition and US OPC recognition. Now, a lot of these things are they're fine. Like I think that it was worth taking the shot to get into the Olympics. So I'm not going to sit here and rewrite history and say, oh, this was a huge mistake. But there have been decisions made to prioritize Olympic chances at times coming at the expense of other priorities. And I think now it is very clear that we need to take the plug of Olympics out of the wall and just be like, we tried and it's done. Now, maybe the landscape changes. I'm not saying that WFDF should just stop focusing on this 100% and just be like, we don't want to be in the Olympics. You know, we never wanted to be in the first place. Take the ball away. No, I think you can still do all of your external messaging about, you know, Olympic stuff, have your meetings with the IOC people, go to these big sporting events. You know, there's still, it's still a great game that I think does fit the Olympic program. I think it's a sport that fits the Olympic program. You know, there's plenty of sports in the Olympics that make no money and have very little fans that are just in the Olympics because they were in 100 years ago. You know? So it's not like Olympics, or it's not like Ultimate never has a chance 100%, but like given the current situation and the rules around the number of athletes and everything else, it's not happening. So we need to reprioritize what we are doing around the growth of the game, because the panacea of Olympic kaboom is not coming. And so what is the plan? How are we rekindling youth participation numbers at the high school level? How are we getting more states to recognize Ultimate and put it into schools as a sanctioned part of youth sports? These are the things that have been successful for lacrosse, for example. You look at the growth of lacrosse, and it's been because they have put tons and tons of effort into getting the sport into schools, and they have reaped the rewards. And, you know, it's not like lacrosse is a major sport, but there's multiple professional leagues that are much more successful than the Ultimate professional leagues, and they have a massive member base and a ton of kids playing. Tons. Like an order of magnitude more than Ultimate. So we have to recognize that while Olympics could have been a great catalyst for that kind of growth, it's now not going to happen. At a bare minimum, it's 10 years away. And that's, you know, if you were to miraculously get into the Australia Games in 2032. So we have to just be like, okay, forget it. Let's focus on how we can take a game that is popular among, you know, elementary, junior, and senior high school students and facilitate that growth. That should be the number one priority of USA Ultimate. They should make multiple hires into the youth organization, including somebody's job who is simply there to try to help local orgs convince their state, you know, or local sports governing bodies for high schools or middle schools, you name it, and get Ultimate into schools. That should be their only job. I want to see less focus on YCCs. I want to see less focus on, you know, forcing kids into playing at the USA Ultimate High School Championship so that they have to pay membership fees. Who cares? We need to get the sport into schools. And like the Olympics was a good concept as a way to do that, but it's not here.
All right, alternative path. Ultimate on ice skates. Look, we look like every other sport
Winter Olympics.
In the Summer Olympics, but the Winter Olympics, what is looking like Ultimate right now? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And how many countries need to be in your sport to be in the Winter Olympics? Like 4? Like, come on. That should have been the path from the beginning. So Winter Olympics. I thought Tom Crawford was the expert here, but apparently not. And in all seriousness, though, the World Games is not the worst consolation prize. I think we all are pretty happy with World Games experience, and for whatever reasons, the World Games seems to have a lot less negative associations than some folks have with the Olympics. Whether that's fair or not is unclear to me. I don't really know much about the World Games impact on local communities or anything, but I think we're in the same boat here. I think we are of the same mind that we need to stop the top-down approach. It doesn't feel like it's working. Like the idea that we can make the top quality Ultimate both of the highest quality and easily consumable, something that is presented well and accessible to the general public, and then use that basically as advertising to get a groundswell of players who want to get involved. It's not happening. It's not happening. But let's poll the listener base, poll everybody who's joining summer leagues. How many of you discovered Ultimate on ESPN 3 or 7 or whatever ESPN we're on, whichever subscription you need to have? You know what I mean? Like it's not a thing that's working. It's not a strategy that's working. So instead of trying to work from the top down, I think there's going to be a movement from people within the community to work from the bottom up, working with youth organizers being the primary way to do that. And you and I have talked more about this, as well as like how we can work with local and state organizations to help encourage not just youth development, but their local league development. We've talked about connecting it to the club system, giving up on the club system as being this elite competitive circuit necessarily that needs to be managed by USA Ultimate, when there are other entities that can handle top level adult play or whatnot in the form of the semi-pro leagues.
How about
this feels like a place where these kinds of questions are going to be asked. These issues are going to be raised. These were ideas that were competing with, focusing on the top. These ideas were competing with it the last time that we had all these conversations, whether it was the initial strategic planning that led to the big visibility is the number one thing, smoking gun, or whether it's the vision tour. Like these are the ideas people were talking about. And so I think we'll continue to see those ideas, as well as a focus on forming a more diverse organization where that's welcoming to a wider swath of the community, that's affordable to play. Like these are different directions that I think we will see people pushing for Ultimate to move towards, rather than this Olympic dream ESPN model.
I think what is encouraging to me is that places where there is real effort being put in to developing the infrastructure necessary to get kids playing, you are seeing great deals of success with participation numbers, growth, and great athletes coming out of those systems. Whether you want to start with Seattle, that, back in the 2000s got it into middle schools and has seen tremendous growth from that, or you want to look at more recent success stories like what's going on in Vancouver with Elevate, and they have just, creating clinics and camps, have just massively expanded access to Ultimate for kids in that city. What's going on in Utah, where there's like YCC training camps and like all of these opportunities, and you're seeing massive growth amongst high school Ultimate there. And they're also putting out some of the best young players as well. There's a reason that their open team won YCC. Like when that infrastructure is being put in place, we're seeing success from it. Now, I thought this was fascinating. At U20s over in Poland, the international teams were coming up to players in the U.S., I think specifically the open team, and being like, wow, Declan Miller, you play in the AUDL. Can I get your autograph on a disc? Like the AUDL is having resonance with the international Ultimate community in a way that we've not really seen with Club Ultimate. Maybe with the very, very top stars. But I think that's fascinating because just gets back to a point that I've been making. You want to talk about top down. We need to recognize that the more consumable format for spectator-driven Ultimate is the single game professional league format. And to me, it continues to be a crazy thing for USA Ultimate not to be working with these leagues, or at least promoting them, showing highlights from them, in other ways engaging with these leagues. Like, are we really still going to fight about the referee thing? Like, is that really going to thing that's going to hold us back?
I don't know. Were you watching WUCCs?
I don't need to watch. Like, I think the Game Advisor system is probably net worse than referees. But I'm not going to let that be the thing that makes me not want to watch International Ultimate. I just feel like this is a stupid wedge issue that doesn't need to be especially now with the Olympics situation the way it is. What are we hoping to gain? And like, even if USA Ultimate just decides, you know what, no, we're still not going to work with the AUDL, but like we'll promote PUL and WUL. Okay, let's start somewhere. To me, like lifting up these organizations that are trying to create a spectator product and be more accessible to fans, that's how you do top down.
Now we may have the opportunity to see that kind of change reflected in USA Ultimate if we start to see a sea change in a change of philosophy after losing out on this opportunity. That there is a path for that to happen. But if I had to speculate, which is what I do here, I think that you're probably going to see the opposite, at least in the short term. You're about to have a lot of people, I think, competing to put their vision of what the future of Ultimate should look like at the forefront. And that is not going to be unifying. I mean, you would think that having a clear objective of getting into the Olympics would have been the unifying force, right? That would have been okay, let's all band together, at least for this time, at least for these years, for 3 years or whatever. Let's band together and try and achieve this goal together because we all stand to benefit from it. But now that's gone. Now there is a gaping hole where it's like, what are we going to try and do? And whatever we decide, how are we going to try and get there? So I think you're actually going to see more competition at the top of Ultimate and for the kind of the heart of Ultimate. What are we going to do? The more politicking and less collaboration. That feels like the more likely scenario for what these next couple of years are going to look like.
I hope you're wrong, but me
too.
In some ways, there is like there's something healthy about having like a robust competition of ideas and potential directions. And I think, there's a very important job coming up for the USA Ultimate Board of Directors. Hiring the next CEO, this is a critical moment. Like, where are we headed? And I often feel that the board of directors is way too insular, way too dominated by, people who are like really at this point not even really involved in Ultimate that much. And some of that is because of by design. You don't necessarily want everybody on the board to be an Ultimate lifer, but I think this is just a really important juncture. And I'm frustrated because we are not getting any information about what's going on at the board level. None. And I know most people don't really care about this stuff, which is understandable, but like it is important. And the last board minutes are from 2018.
They probably just haven't met since then, I assume.
But is
that worse?
It's
how
like,
much worse is it?
I give a little bit of a pass to some stuff because like COVID and but these meeting minutes, these are incredibly important. It's important to understand what the board is working on and what they're doing. How else do we make informed votes and like ask for the people who are making the highest level decisions to make the right decisions? And this becomes amplified in importance because of where things are with the Olympics. It's just a fact. So where do we go from here? Like I want to state, like, I want Tom Crawford to write a 2,000 word essay on the USA Ultimate website, or I'd be happy to publish it on Ultiworld. Like, what's the plan?
We've seen this statement from Liftif. I would not be surprised if there's one coming from USA Ultimate, if there's one down the pike. I think it would be great to have that kind of frank transparency, especially given some of the lack of thereof from a governance standpoint. I also encourage people to read the companion pieces we posted back in 2020 about the advantages of getting into the Olympics and also the costs and why it might not be a good idea. I think that's good reflection on, what we were trying to achieve and why, so that we can, think about how to move forward as a community. I'm also starting to read some stuff about like some of the other sports that got in. Yeah, we're different than a lot of other sports in some ways, but we probably have more in common with most sports than we seem to want to admit. But it is interesting to read about, what goes on into making these decisions. It helps us better understand how this all came about, what all this time and effort led to.
There's many good things that have come out of this, sort of push to get into the Olympics. There has been professionalization. Arguably, it swung too far at times. Let's get the beer garden back at Club Nationals. Like, it's a fun game, But I think the USA Ultimate has professionalized as an organization in a great deal of ways. And they were able to weather COVID, which was just absolutely brutal for amateur sports orgs, and they made it through it. And they've been operating with fewer staff, and like, that's difficult, but it's important that they made it through it. And that's in large part because Tom Crawford put them on a financial path to success and had a rainy day fund and many other things. And those are all things, getting the board up to standard nonprofit spec and like doing all of these things that are behind the scenes that you don't see. That stuff is important. But fundamentally, we need to think about like, what is the growth path for Ultimate and how do we get back on it now that we're past COVID and trying to move into, 2023 and beyond. So, I mean, I remain optimistic, but I think that it's time for us to rethink how that growth path is going to go. And, the sectarian nature right now of all of these sort of organizations within Ultimate, this is a major net negative for the sport. And I hope that the leadership around all of these orgs can start to recognize that.
We've too many orgs. We've too many orgs that are not all pulling in the same direction, and that's not just at the like USA Ultimate and Semi-Pro League level. Like, there are just so many different organizations that are making important decisions about Ultimate in local communities that are not connected in a meaningful way. And to me, that feels like one of the biggest problems. I mean, it leads to many of the other issues that we have. So I would love to see more of a unification on that front. That's my hope for what's next for us. I'm not going to run for office.
Well, we are going to take a break, but before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Sunset Lake CBD. Sunset Lake CBD is a hemp farm located just outside of Burlington, Vermont. For years, they produced milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and in 2019 started diversifying and growing hemp for CBD. Sunset Lake CBD believes that their farm-table approach is the best way for you to get responsibly produced, high-quality CBD products that actually work. Sunset Lake CBD crafts topicals, gummies, oils, and more to help with stress, aches, and sleep. Let me see. I'm going to find my... Here it is. CBD oil, mint flavor with the melatonin. put a little bit in the mint tea at night. Killer. Gets great sleep, feel great the next day. So you can check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com. Use code DEEPLOOK, all one word, DEEPLOOK, for 20% off your order. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer-owned, Vermont-grown. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Well, the USA swept gold at the Under-20 World Championships over in Wrocław, Poland. They beat France in both the U20 Open and U20 Women's divisions. And France, a bit of a surprise contestant in the final. But the U.S. teams clearly looked like the best units there and ended up winning relatively comfortably. But, you know, they got some tests along the way. France was very impressive, Keith.
Very, very impressive performance from France. And I think that's going to be one of the number one things that people are talking about coming out of this is the success of the French delegation. Though they're not the only international community, I think, that's going to generate some hype. Quick correction for you. We did not sweep. The U.S. did not sweep because there is a third division in which the U.S. did not participate. The under-20 mixed division, which was won by Hungary. Yes, Hungary, who was the lowest seeded team coming into the tournament. So go away with the gold medal. I think they beat Switzerland in the final. And very exciting for them. I think that they won both the U20 and under-17 mixed division. Right. So who knows? Keep an eye out on Hungary. I know very little about Hungarian Ultimate, but definitely exciting to see them doing well. However, France, very, very impressive. In the open final, the French team, they'd already lost pretty significantly to the U.S. earlier during the tournament. And while they were very competitive in the beginning of the game, they let the U.S. go on a run kind of through halftime. And they were able to bring it back a little bit, but never really threatened. But in the women's division, it basically the same script played out, except that it seemed a lot scarier. The French were able to bring it down to a 1-point game, 13-12, and it was like pretty stressful. So a little bit different form for both of these games, but still both pretty competitive. I mean, the French did not look like they were out of their depth in either of these matchups.
Okay, Keith. Chloe Hakimi led the stat sheet for the Team USA in that final. I mean, are we looking at she's 15? Are we looking at the next big thing? Like, you don't see 15-year-old come out and look like this at this level very often.
Second on the team for the tournament in total points with 20 behind Elise Friedman. Not leading the team in assists. I think she was like fourth, but she was basically like fourth in like goals and fourth in like assists. Was one of the most important handlers for the team, is already a pretty well-rounded player, has good athleticism in a body that I imagine is still developing. So you're probably going to see her physical presence increase over the next few years as well. But just a remarkable polish for a player of that age. I think they said that she'd been playing since like she was 7. So she's already got like 8 years of experience. Also his twin sister. So keep an eye out for that. I believe Vivian. So really this is a star turn. I'm all aboard the hype train. We're probably gonna have to wait a long time for that to come to pass. It's gonna be hard to be a youth ultimate star and get a lot of attention. What Jack Verzou is really the only one in the modern media era to garner a lot of notoriety before really entering the college sphere. But man, Hakimi was incredibly impressive.
On the boys' side, in terms of Team USA, Declan Kervick was the stat leader, 17 assists and 6 goals. Oscar Graf, big goal scorer for the team, had 19 goals. Tobias Brooks, Declan Miller also up there in the stats for the team, and probably the two players that most impressed us at High School National Invite, Keith. No surprise to see them showing up for the team. Brooks led the team in the final with 3 goals and 3 assists.
Both teams, both the women's and open teams were pretty deep. It didn't feel like they were reliant on a specific like subgroup of top level players. But on the open side, Kervick really the quarterback for the D line, which is pretty much the same role that he was fulfilling in college to great success in his freshman year at Vermont. Definitely someone to watch. I still feel like, and maybe this is biased by my priors, I still feel like Miller was probably the team's premier player. But one of the players who jumped out and already gained, like a lot of people were talking about them on Twitter, is someone who doesn't stand on the stat sheet, Erica Brown. Erica Brown, incredible pulls, disgusting defense. You know, I'm calling it the Erica Brown D, the EBD. But when you pull and then you Callahan the pull on the first, like that is this. She has done that multiple times. Not just at this tournament. There other events. I believe that she did it in the Color of Ultimate game. But wow, what a defender! And the pulls were huge. The U.S. did get a Callahan in this game, or in the final. I believe it was Kervick who caught the Callahan, and it came off of a Brown pull to basically the back line. Only 8 total scores. So like if you just look at the counting stats, not going to jump off the page, but Brown was awesome on defense. She's really talented, and is another one of the AUDL players on this team. So maybe it was getting some giving out some autographs, especially after the way she was playing.
Any other notes on players, international players that stood out to you, Keith?
Yeah. Well, look, this person is not international, but worth noting because it's an interesting storyline. Margot Nissen, playing with France, tried out for the U.S. team, didn't make the team, gets to play against the U.S. in the final, and played pretty solidly. It was one of the key handlers for that team. Camille Blanc, though, was maybe their biggest standout as a big downfield threat. But I'd say the player that probably attracted my attention the most was the primary handler for the French Open team, Malvin Schmidt. Really dynamic backfield player with a ton of quickness and some creative and electric throws, able to snap off things like no pivot backhands, high release throws. I mean, this is a pretty daring throwing team that ran through a very small group of players. You know, pretty much ran out like a 10-man rotation for the entire final. And Schmidt was clearly the centerpiece for them. I'm not sure how old Schmidt is or what his background is, but definitely a player to monitor moving forward. It's hard. I would love to like highlight more of like the U.S. players, but there was such a diverse set of contributions from everybody. It's like hard to say exactly who stood out. And you know, when I came on and like I was thinking about this game, I was thinking about the women's final. I'm like, Acacia Hahn was really strong, and Chagall Gelfand was kind of the center backfield rock. And I remember watching the final, and I was like, wow, these are the players I think who stood out the most to me: Chloe Akimi, Chagall Gelfand, and Acacia Hahn. And then like all three of them had turnovers in Francis' run to try and get back into the game. Like I think there's a foot block and a hand block and a throwaway, and they like all were struggling in the moments that it looked like France was going to get back into it. But they pulled it out.
I just want to shout out the top stat getter in each division. Mm-hmm. In U20 women's, Johanna Roy from Austria had 30 assists and 13 goals. Amazing number there. In U20 Open, Dariusz Jedras from Poland had 30 goals and 15 assists. Had a game where he was involved in 10 of their 11 scores. Just totally dominant. In U20 mixed, Abel Csillag, I'm doing my best. Hungary leading the way with 38 assists and 20 goals. Unbelievable stuff. And gets them to a gold medal in that division. So impressive performances from some players we will likely see in the future on U24 teams and, hey, even the adult club teams sooner rather than later.
There was a Sports Center clip, I believe, in there. So we're already seeing them get some shine.
All right, so let's turn our attention to this weekend's Elite Select Challenge, USA Ultimate Triple Crown Tour event, and a very important tournament when we're talking about the rankings. Again, we're going to do a whole segment on the rankings in our subscriber bonus segment out the back, so we hope you join us for that. ESC, it's a little weaker, I feel like, than usual, Keith. Not as many national teams from the past. A couple, but it's it's going to be a big decider for, is Vault going to hang on to its Mid-Atlantic bid? What is Sixers going to do in the women's division? Are they going to come in and earn a bid for the Northeast? In mixed, you've got Exist, and then a lot of teams that, are hoping to make nationals. Does Exist cruise, or do they struggle along the way? So some interesting storylines, even if there's not necessarily a lot of teams at these tournaments that are probably going to end up at nationals.
Definitely going to be important for the rankings. But you're right. I mean, when I look at the bottom of this tournament, there are teams I've never heard of. Sometimes in the middle of this tournament, in each division, it's kind of hard to come up with a club team that competes at one of these tournaments that I've literally never heard of. But here we are. That is kind of the color of this tournament. But there's certainly unpredictability too. There does feel like there's a top tier of teams that could just kind of waltz through each of the divisions, but I really don't know what's going to happen in the middle. And I don't know if those teams are actually, like, there could be a team hiding in the reeds in any of these divisions that will eventually be a surprise nationals qualifier. Like, I don't think that's beyond the pale.
No,
the women's division, maybe
not.
the women's division, maybe it's a stretch, but in the other divisions,
let's start in the women's division. Talk about these top seeds. Sixers comes in as the number 1 overall seed. Of course, we saw them at Worlds. They're back playing in USAU for the first time since 2019 when they made it to the final. Parcha is the 2 seed. The 3 seed is Minneapolis Pop, and the 4 seed is Crush City, and they're out of Houston. So, Keith, I think Sixers is the obvious heavy favorite here. Do you see Pop or Parcha having a chance to get the upset and win this tournament?
No, I don't. So simply put, that does not seem like the most likely outcome. I do think that there are teams beyond those two that might be able to challenge. I think it's more likely that one of those two teams loses to a different team than it is that they beat Sixers.
Yeah, fair. So you're taking Sixers. Who's going to make the final?
I think the other finalist for me is going to be Parcha. Just kind of go chalky here. I think that there's a chance that someone like Siege, or could Crush City finally have that big tournament? Could they finally pop off? I think it'd be difficult. I think that they could break in. It's some of these seeds like Ozone 7 and Rival 11. Rival at 11.
Yeah.
Can they fall in that far? I don't know about that. But I don't really think they're a threat to win either. So yeah, I'm going with Sixers over Parcha.
Sixers over Parcha. That's also what I'm taking. Yeah, we get that. We get an Ozone Rival first round matchup in the mini bracket. But this Rival team's not what it once was. It just isn't. When they lost Sophie Knowles, I think that was kind of like the beginning of a downtrend for them. So we'll see. That's why we play the games. Let's go over to the mixed division. Number 1 overall seed is Exist. Kansas City United is the 2 seed. Jug Handle out of New Jersey, the 3 seed. And Shine from Nashville, led by Jesse Schaffner and Eli Modica, is your 4 seed. Exist will be the favorite, but they should, if things go to seed, that Shine Exist game in semi should be a fun one, Keith.
That is the one to watch. These are the 2 nationals teams in the field. I don't think we actually have a roster for Shine yet, so not exactly sure what it's going to look like after kind of the top end of the roster, but they looked like the real deal last year. So I think it's plenty reasonable to expect them to be a better team this year after making nationals. Usually that's a good magnet for talent. this field looks, pretty measured across the board. I think that the middle tier is pretty fat. I don't know much about the bottom end of the tournament, but I think you could see Jug Handle finish anywhere from like 2nd to 10th. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Team like Grand Army or Alloy, they're the 13 and 14 seeds. Like, could they make semis? Why not? Like, I definitely think that's within the scope of the mixed division, maybe more than any of the other divisions.
It should be a very competitive tournament, even if the top end is not as strong. I think it's like all the way down to the last seed. Like, teams are going to be competitive.
Yeah, that seems like the case to me. Who do you got as your picks?
I'm going to take Exist to win. I think that Exist Shine game is going to be very interesting. But I think Exist's talent this year is a step above what else we see at this tournament. My other finalist, I'm going to go with Waterloo. They're out of Austin. They got a great start to their season back in June. It's kind of a warm-up tournament, but they did beat Public Enemy 11-10. And, Austin's a great scene. I believe this is a new team, as far as I know, Keith.
I think they formed last year.
Okay. But I think that they've got a real good chance. I think they've got a winnable pool against Grand Army, CLX, and Jug Handle. And I think if they can get to, get through to that good path into semis, that they can absolutely make it to the final. I think, Exist probably wins 15-10 or something like that, but I got Waterloo in the final.
Yeah, Waterloo, I remember from last season because they won their section. They beat Public Enemy in the final of their sectionals. So that was kind of like they break into the scene. They actually played at this tournament last year too, and I think that they went like 2-4 or something. They did not do well. Also, just awesome logo for this team. It looks very like corporate, like almost like Olympic. It's a lot of different colors and swirls around a whale. I don't know are there whales in Austin? I don't know.
If they have a good piece of merch, they're going to sell a lot of it.
Yes, if this team has good merch and makes nationals, they can moondog it. We'll see what's up with it. I'm definitely going with Exist.
Moondog has become a verb. Continue.
I'm going with Exist to win. I think that I almost was going to say that I think they're a bigger favorite than Sixers, but that's probably not true. Who do you think's a bigger favorite, Exist or Sixers?
Oh, Sixers.
Okay. I don't. Man, the spot for their second for the top team to play against feels wide open. KCU had such a nice start to the season.
Yep.
But they're a little more mixed at Pro League Challenge. Like they lost heads up a Shine. They beat a Lawless team that we're a little less impressed by. Mostly they're known for beating BFG in that matchup. What has Jug Handle done? Have we gotten some Jug Handle results? Let's see. So they went to Crossover Challenge, Village Open. Yeah. They lost to Alloy. We're 13-10 to Exist at Crossover, but those scores were weirdly close. They beat Loco and lost to Alloy. Not impressed by the results. I think I would take Shine and maybe even Lotus.
Yeah,
so maybe I should take whoever.
Lotus has a real chance.
Maybe I should take whoever I think is going to lose that matchup. Like KCU feels like the safe pick, especially because I have to gamble on which of Lotus and Shine would lose their matchup and then be on the other side of the bracket.
Kansas City has a nice little ultimate scene.
I'm going to go with KCU because of that.
Okay.
Because of the format, really.
All right, let's move over to the men's division. Austin Double Wide is your number 1 overall seed. Virginia Vault, number 2. Mad Men out of Madison, number 3. And Tanasi out of Nashville, number 4. Double Wide is not the team it once was, Keith. I am not super high on this Double Wide team, but they still might be the best team here. Going to be fun to see how this shakes out. I have them getting to the final, just kind of because I think that they're going to win their pool and are going to win their... Who would they get? If they win their pool, they get the 2 seed from C, which I think is probably going to be Mad Men. I'm picking GOAT to get the upset there. Yeah, I think they win that. I think they get to semis. I think they beat Tanasi or Phoenix there. So, I got them to finals. Vault and GOAT, I think, is going to be the other semi. There's some players on Vault that are on the DC Breeze. They're going to have to decide: are they playing Vault this weekend? Are they playing Breeze this weekend in the playoffs, trying to beat New York? I'm going to take Goat to win that game, and I'm going to have Double Wide beating Goat in the final.
Interesting. I do think some of the implications of this division are fascinating beyond 2 wins. You know, everybody's kind of waiting to see, like, is Vault for real? That's probably number one. But after the way we saw Sub-Zero play at US Open, if Madman looks good, like, are we starting to worry about Sub-Zero's chances of making nationals?
That reminds me, I need to make a correction from last week because I idiotically talked about Sub-Zero and Machine being in the same region, which they are not. Sub-Zero is in the North Central with Madmen, and Machine is in the Great Lakes. The North Central is kind of brutal this year.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, yeah. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but you know, if Madman is good, North Central gains a lot of interest, gains some intrigue.
Yes. Oh, it could be spicy.
But to me, yeah, this is a 3-horse race: Double Wide, Vault, and Goat. Double Wide has the inside lane because they don't have to play Vault or Goat until the final, presumably, if everything goes according to plan. So I've got Double Wide in the final. I'm going to take them to win. And I'm going to take them over Goat. So we ended up with the same thing. Sadly.
Okay. Goat was pretty good at Worlds. They lost to Clapham. They lost close to Ring. They beat Nomadic Tribe. They lost by 1 to Mooncatchers. So I don't know. I think this year's Goat team, like a lot of the top players in Toronto, skipped playing for the Toronto Rush this year and are focused squarely on Goat. Goat could definitely win this tournament. I'm curious to see where they're at. I mean, Canada's had a bad year. Let's just acknowledge that, right? They don't medal in U20 Open. Their girls team finishes in 3rd. Their World Games team just totally misses the mark in terms of the expectations coming in. Their teams didn't do especially well at Worlds.
Save red flag.
Red flag. Yeah.
But otherwise,
credit is due. Although they got just absolutely obliterated by Mixtape, but they made the final. It's been a tough year, so it would be nice for the Canadian fans to see Goat show up this weekend and get a win. I think it's a winnable tournament for them.
They honestly may have the most talented roster, but Goat's going to go. That does not always.
And how will they travel
for them? That's definitely part of it. But you know, we've seen some strong turns in the AUDL for players like Luc Camire and James Lewis. So they pick up Gail Ancelon from the French World Games team. So they have some good players to
very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, obviously everybody knows about the foot block on Dylan Freechild, but they add those to, you know, the players that you know and are familiar with, your Andrew Carrolls and your Mike McKenzie's and your Remy Ojo, and Isaiah Massey-Kelly is still kicking around. So I think that Goat's going to be pretty good, and they definitely have a chance of winning this thing.
All right, well, that is going to do it for this week's edition of Deep Look. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us for our Out the Back, where we go deep on the club rankings and what this weekend could mean at the Elite Select Challenge. multiworld.com/subscribe. Join us there. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.